Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. I hope you're all doing well in these weird times. Thanks to those who've left comments on my review for Tenet. I first saw it back on the 24th of August in an IMAX preview press screening, and I said at the time I would endeavour to go and watch the movie again because I wasn't sure coming out of it whether there was any substance to it. And I don't like feeling that when I come out of a Christopher Nolan movie because he is ordinarily one of my favourite filmmakers, and I came out of it with my ears pulverised, my brain stewed, and thinking, okay, was that just a load of sound and fury signifying nothing? So that kind of left me a little bit rattled, as those who've seen my initial review might be able to discern. So I went back and saw it again at my local cinema down the road from me, which is now reopened again. I had my first actual back-to-back day of films in my local cinema for the first time in 6 months, which was great. That was a really, really lovely, liberating experience, though I did have to wear a mask, obviously, pretty much all day through that, because I was doing one film after the other. But it was great anyway. And I did go and see Tenet again, and I was unsure whether my opinion on it would change. And I'm pleased to say my opinion has changed on it somewhat. I don't think it's top tier Christopher Nolan. I still think it's a mid-range Nolan. I think it's above Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises, both of which I consider to be his weakest films. It's far, far below the likes of The Prestige, which I consider to be his masterpiece. It's far below the likes of The Dark Knight, Inception, Memento, Dunkirk. All of those I hold in very, very high regard as well. So it's a mid-range Nolan. However, having watched the film once, I was able to anticipate the beats of the storyline, and I should say that this review is going to entail spoilers. I imagine many of you have already seen it, so this is going to be a spoilerific review. I mean, it's kind of impossible not to talk about second impressions of the movie without going into spoilers, but I also think in the UK and Ireland, at least, it's been out for long enough that we can now start engaging with this on a spoiler level. So I was actually relatively impressed with it. What I like about it was that what it is, it's a literalization of Christopher Nolan's obsession with time. This goes right the way back to Memento and following. But whereas those films were very, very low budget to almost non-existent budget exercises that had to use narrative as a kind of time manipulation, Christopher Nolan has now worked his way into a position of commanding huge budgets and huge technical expertise, which means that he can now paint these ideas on much more grandiose visual levels. The irony being that Tenet is still a very, very exposition-led movie, but my point being that it's the visual majesty of the set pieces, particularly on second viewing, that often communicates the emotional impact of what's going on. And you can either see that as a good or a bad thing. I'm kind of in the middle. But what you basically have with Tenet is a movie that works halfway up to one point and then basically retraces its steps back to the chronological start of the narrative, and then goes back a scene before that to another sequence that otherwise is only relayed anecdotally through dialogue. I think that's really, really clever. Again, it is like the apex of everything that has consumed Christopher Nolan's films. The idea of the mutability of time, the subjectivity of time, and when the fact that the first half of the movie plays out as a James Bond pastiche with John David Washington's unnamed protagonist looking brilliant in Jeffrey Kurland's suit designs on the trail of this nefarious plot, which did click into view more closely on second viewing. That trundles along for like the first half of the film, up until the point where you get the inverted car chase sequence, and then you actually see the implications of the time style machines that Kenneth Branagh's evil character Sator is using, which he basically uses to invert himself and basically go backwards against the flow of everything that's happened before. John David Washington's character ultimately has to do this to save Elizabeth Debicki's cat, Sator's wife, because she has been shot with an inverted bullet from her husband. So there are these grace notes of sacrifice and humanity that come out. The fact that he inverts himself to initially to save her life. They have to basically move her back through time in order to buy time so they can save her. I think that humanity comes out more on the second viewing amidst all this great big like roaring noisy spectacle. But also, I really like the idea that what you've got is basically half a movie in one direction and then half a movie in another direction. I don't think any other director other than Nolan would have got away with that. I mean, let alone being given more than $200 million to be able to do it. So I admire and I appreciate the audacity of that, and I like the way that basically the crux of the movie, particularly when we get into the world saving aspect of it, the idea that there has been this 9 point entropy defying algorithm from the future that has been sort of communicated back to Kenneth Branagh's character in the present, in inverted commas, that he is then looking to bury underground in his old Soviet mining town, and then he's got a dead man switch that will set it off. All of those plot machinations came into greater focus on second viewing, remarkably so actually, despite the fact that I think the sound mixing is still very, very poor and very challenging. Those plot threads did come into greater focus the second time around because I'd acclimatised to the film's rhythms on the first viewing, and I was able to anticipate in broad strokes what was going on. I was then able to sort of listen out more closely to what was happening. But what I really liked about the movie was that it's that almost incidental scene that's initially relayed between Elizabeth Debicki and John David Washington's characters about the moment where Sator, her husband, basically blackmailed her into staying with him. Initially, this is relayed through, in the forward propelling bit of the narrative, this is relayed early on through dialogue and through a flashback sequence. As it turns out, we then retrace our steps back to that moment. And what it does is I think it highlights the seemingly this sort of these moments in our lives on which everything pivots, like that conversation that basically determined the hideous course of her life from then on. The fact that she was remaining with an abusive arms dealer husband is then used as the motivation when they're going back through time to basically undo it. It's almost like that. This is complicated to explain, but it's almost like a literalization of hindsight is a powerful thing. Kat knows that after that conversation on that yacht in Vietnam, her life was horrible. So by being inverted, she can go back and basically undo those mistakes, free herself, and also save the world at the same time. And I like the way that the movie takes an almost incidental, casual moment and kind of blows it up. And it kind of made me think on what seemingly casual, incidental moments is my own life pivoted without me knowing it. What are those moments that define your life going one direction or another? It's a classic Christopher Nolan trope, and again, I think it's realised on a gargantuan scale with a huge budget in these great big roaring set pieces that are very well realised by Hoyt van Hoyten, the cinematographer. Again, the dialogue mixing is a real problem. I was listening out more the second time around. There was loads of stuff that I missed still. I think I'm going to have to go and see it a third time, really, and I'm even more interested to see if my opinion is going to change the third time around. But it did make more sense the second time around. I think it's a more structurally sound movie the second time around. I really wasn't sure about that the first time I saw it. The other thing that I think added more poignancy to it, that I only really got the broad strokes impact of the first time around, was what happens with Robert Pattinson's character Neil. The idea that, I mean, at the end of the movie, I discerned this the first time round. The idea that the future protagonist recruited Neil, and the future Neil then came back. But then that got me thinking, well, surely does that mean that Robert Pattinson's character was moving in inverted time all the way back through the events of the film that we've just seen? Obviously, we don't see the film from his point of view. We see it from John David Washington's point of view. But the moment when John David Washington inverts himself, everything is coming at him in the opposite direction. And I kind of thought, well, surely how would Robert Pattinson's character be able to navigate dialogue and conversations with people if that's what he was seeing? But then I kind of thought, oh, well, clearly what's happened is that he's been working his way back from the future to a certain moment in the past. Presumably he then used one of the time style machines, as they're called, re-inverted himself, and then proceeded forward again. I'm assuming that's what happened. There are lots of different ways to interpret the movie. There are paradoxes that in the manner of all time travel movies, Christopher Nolan almost kind of invites us to accept with a shrug, because let's face it, very few time travel movies make sense. I mean, if you pick apart Back to the Future or the Terminator or Avengers Endgame, the tropes of time travel don't really add up. It is paradoxical. I think it is interesting that at the end of the movie, they basically do save the world from this entropy destroying plot, and yet we also know that in spite of that, John David Washington's character is on a path into the future in order to meet Robert Pattinson's character Neil again. So does that mean that everything is destined to come back in a loop? And does that mean that this cycle of the Tenet operation is meant to repeat itself again? Again, it's a paradox. We're invited in the movie to don't try and understand it, just feel it. And I think actually feeling it is important. I felt more the second time around. This is the key thing. I felt more humanity. I felt there were more philosophical undercurrents the first time. I felt there was more humour the second time around. There's a brilliant bit where the sequence in Amalfi where John David Washington drops Elizabeth Debicki's character Kat off on Sator's yacht, and then one of the Russian goons comes up on another boat and he smiles and waves at them. That I thought was very funny. There are little grace notes of humour like that, which do threaten to get lost because the movie is noisy. It's too noisy. I really appreciated Ludwig Göransson's score more. The idea that you've got the orchestra playing backwards. I don't know if that means they were actually playing the notes backwards or if it was recorded like in the conventional sense and reversed. I'm going to have to look that up. But that woozy, disorienting, backwards-forwards approach of the music with these thrumming, like Vangelis-style electronics really did stand out more the second time around. He's a terrific composer. Yeah, I liked it a lot more the second time around. I've got to be honest. Again, it's not a Nolan masterpiece, but there is more to it than I initially thought, and it has left me thinking again about the mutability of time. It's stuck with me, and I think for all its flaws, if a film sticks with you, that is commendable. So those who saw it and were overwhelmed with it to a negative degree, I completely understand. That's what I thought. I would encourage you to maybe go and see it again, particularly if you're a Christopher Nolan fan and you'd be disappointed by your first viewing of it. I would encourage you to go and see it again. Feel free to drop me a comment here at Kubrick Corner, and stay tuned for more reviews, and I'll see you soon. Bye.